Okay, cool. I hope everybody had a good Sunday since we just met on Saturday. But um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So on our meeting minutes, return and report. I don't know if there's anything necessarily we need to report on. Does anyone think differently?
No, not much happened since Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I personally haven't had a chance to look at what's going on for the class this week. But if there's anything from the class this week that anyone knows we should talk about, we can talk about that.
Any questions I can answer?
Brother James, did you say that you were going to provide feedback on our proposals?
I did. What was your proposal?
We had two. We had what we called the crap app. It was about, like bathroom questions, and then a seminary tracker. Seminary reading.
I am working my way. Let's see. I have got like 50 emails in my Gmail account, and so that is probably one. Who sent? Was there a particular student who sent it to me?
I submitted it on the comments section on iLearn, so I didn't send it in email. I don't know if anybody else did.
Yeah, I submitted it through Gmail.
And who was that said that?
Maxine.
Okay, all right. And I see emails from Patty's. I will get to those this morning. That'll be done here in the next half hour. In fact, keep an eye on your email. I'll try and go look for it. And if I've got any, excuse me, if I have any comments, I'll pop up back onto the audio and let you know.
Okay.
Any suggestions or ideas.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have questions?
Okay, I'm going to mute out. I'll go look at your emails and I'll try and get back to you. I'll just put something here in the comment box rather than interrupt your meeting. And then if I see that you put some comments back in there, then I'll pop you into the meeting. So I'll try not to interrupt you guys anymore.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Have a good meeting.
You too. Okay, I think we can just do the tech lessons then. So, Garrett, are you ready to present on JS objects?
Yep, I had one question regarding the topic assignments. Is there anyone that's actually controlling that, or is it finished, or?
Allie set them up, and then I think we thought that they were fine. If you have something you want to suggest, that sounds good.
No, it's just that they had changed Saturday morning before presenting, but as long as they're going to stay the same, I'm fine with that. So let me share. Well, first I'm just going to talk about JavaScript objects. It's a way that we're able to control data. And so normally in writing JavaScript code, you can have a bunch of variables listing things out, and you can control your data that way and be able to present the user with what you wanted to show them. But a way, as you, I guess, abstract yourself away from the data farther by using an object, then you're able to, I guess, make things more complex as you abstract away from the actual data, like x equals 4. But now putting that variable inside of a class, giving it a name, you're able to step away from that. Essentially, they're used to simulate the real world, and I guess I can show you an example. So you can see the syntax. Share screen. don't see how I can.
Go over to the left side of your screen.
Oh, there it is.
And-
Okay. Okay, so this is in NetBeans. I just have a simple HTML document with some JavaScript in it, and a div with an ID of container. And inside the script, the JavaScript, I start with an empty string, and I'll end up just adding things to that string. This right here, this calendar event, this is the declaration of an object named calendar event. And then the syntax for that is it's inside of curly braces ended with a semicolon. And each one of these green are properties, and each one of these strings inside of there is the value of that property of the preceding, and they're separated by commas. They're comma separated values and parameters. And what this will do is it will save all these things into that object, and that way that object contains that information, and then you can query or remove that data from that object. And here, just a loop that goes through each one of these properties and saves it to the empty string and then outputs it to the div. And that way it will just say the class meeting, team 7 weekly meeting, 9 a.m. is 1 hour long and 30 minutes. But can show that. To change my screen. Where is it? So it looks something like this, where when that's outputted, it just concatenates everything inside that object together. And then there's something called prototyping, which allows you to create a object like so, and you list out all of the properties, and then use the keyword this, referencing the calendar event, and retyping those. So then it's when you are referencing the event type, you're actually referencing this object's property down below. And so this is like a specific calendar event named wake up, which will allow you to, you could have a bunch of these, all new calendar events, and they would have all of these different properties. And you could have a bunch of these declared either by directly in the code or by some other use like an API or something like that. And this isn't really about objects, but that is one way to show it working. And that looks like this. It will take all those things inside of the object and concatenate them together using this code here. But if anyone has any questions, just ask about objects. Anyone have any questions?
Not so far.
Okay. But I guess one similarity or one thing about objects is that in JavaScript they have a relationship to JSON files because JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and those are usually, they have the properties along with all their values, and those are just stored in a JSON file, look similar to a text document, and you'd be able to access those and be able to pull them into your JavaScript and be able to do different things with them. But I think it's cool. JavaScript objects, they're able to just be able to control data and be able to, I guess, step back away from it a little bit and be able to make them more complex, your programming more complex. that is all that I have.
Thanks, Garrett.
You're
Great,
welcome.
thanks.
It's making me think of what is it? Java and its objects and classes. So when you're doing this, that's what it's making me think of, and I didn't realize that JavaScript had. You know, I mean, I know the topics that are listed, but I didn't know how exactly it related to the object. So thanks.
And the second piece of code I showed is on the GitHub, just in a release. If you want access to that, you can get it there.
Cool. Thanks.
Who else is teaching today?
I think me.
Okay.
I apologize up front for my voice. It may last, it may not. I don't know. Let me share. That's really interesting. It's not, hold on. There it is. Anybody see my screen yet?
Yeah.
Okay. So, just a little PowerPoint for a piece of this. You see it? So my topic today was the DOM, document object model. You know, in a lot of our computer science type stuff, we like to come up with kind of stupid names. I think this is one of them. I think what they do is they come up with an abbreviation, and then they try to find words to match the abbreviation rather than the other way around. I think they like DOM, so then they had to come up with something that made sense. Anyway,
Hey, Dan.
this is a truism. Always code as if the guy who ends up maintaining your code will be a violent psychopath who knows where you live. So this applies to all of our coding. You know, be nice to the maintainer, because the guy who maintains it is the one who has it for the longest life. We're not going to learn a lot about JavaScript in this. The DOM essentially makes all of the components of a web page accessible to you as a programmer. Typically,
I can't see the presentation.
okay, hold on. Heck. It's not even showing up. Hold on. Let me.
You might need to click on like a video button to turn your video on.
Yeah, hold on.
Because I just see the cute little monkey. My daughter asked if I was talking to a monkey. Oh, now I see it.
How's that? I guess what part do you see?
I see your face now.
Okay, so that's ugly. We want to get rid of that. Let's see. There we go.
There we go.
So the DOM essentially is a tool like an object, which lets you get access to all of the elements on a web page. You can access any of the HTML, any of their attributes, any of the text, pretty much anything on the page that can be rendered by the browser, you can manipulate using the document object model. Typically, the typical code that's used is JavaScript, although JavaScript is not the DOM is not part of JavaScript, and JavaScript is not part of the DOM. Those are separate specifications, but typically we use JavaScript because it's easy and it's fast. And so we talked about this. You know, really what happens is when you go to render a web page, your browser builds a model of it that the browser uses to render the page. So it tells the browser, you know, where's this thing, what color is that thing, how big is this thing, and the DOM makes it available to the browser, but it also exposes it all to the programming side too. So here's a little example, tiny bit of HTML. All it has is a couple of elements. It's got a title there, H1, and it's got a paragraph with some italics in it. So this is what the browser reads, and this is what the user gets on the other end. I mean, it's pretty straightforward what it does. So it kind of goes along with JavaScript objects. You know, one of the ways that you could manipulate the DOM is to build yourself an object that you could manipulate using JavaScript or whatever you want. And if you did it that way, you might make it a little less complicated. So here's kind of a boring looking thing, but this is essentially what the tree that the browser looks at that the DOM provides, right? So this is an object based on this piece of HTML code. This is what the DOM looks like in a sort of a graphical way, and you see the top object here is the document, hence the name, you know, document object model. So all of these elements are on this page, and they can be seen by the browser, and you can manipulate them. So why is it useful? Because it lets you do stuff dynamically to the page without having to do a whole lot of stuff. These are standards, right? So the DOM has a standard with the W3.org, and if you want to go read that standard, that's what it says. It's pretty boring, but nonetheless, it's there. Now here's a cautionary tale down here. The developers of web browsers are not very standardized on how they implement things. So what that means is if you're a coder and you're putting together some code for a web page, you need to be careful what features you implement, because sometimes those features aren't available in whatever browser the user happens to have. So it's good to kind of figure out which ones are available. I'm going to cut this a little short because my voice is leaving. I'm going to share a different part of the screen so you can look at a couple of little little examples. You see that, kitty cat?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a really silly example, and using the DOM and some JavaScript just to manipulate this border. Okay, the border around the cat. So clicking on a button changes the border. And the way that's done is using the DOM, right? So if you look, can you see the code?
Yeah.
It's really dirt simple. And these buttons are just manipulating that border. Really straightforward. Here's another one, that simply tries to change different attributes based on some color that we use. Right? These are really little and silly examples, but you kind of get the idea, right? It's pretty straightforward to do. Let me try to go back. So like I said, it's really important that when you're looking at implementing one of these kind of things, unless it's silly like that, there are some pieces that are not supported by all browsers. So you might want to look at that. Let me jump over. You can, that DOM tree has what are called child nodes. And all that means is there's an order to the tree, and you can walk that tree by going through all of these various things. So you can also use that in your code. For example, this particular piece of code uses that, right? It uses this child node. Pick the one that it wants to use. So you can make it really, really interesting and dynamic. So this is a little example of sort of what Garrett was talking about, where this JS objects properties, you can get access to them, and it works for DOM property objects too. Let me zoom ahead. Nodes, yada yada. There's too much stuff here. So here's a sort of a diagram, a schematic, if you want to call it that, of the document object model, and you've got all of these things that you have access to. I guess that's really the takeaway from this. The idea that you take, for example, a web page, and you wanted to be able to let a user customize how it looks. They don't like the font you picked, so they can pick a different one. They don't like the color you picked, so they can pick a different one. Maybe they're like me and they've got old eyes, so they need the font a little bigger. They can do that. All of those things can be accessed via the document object model. And so if you wanted to, for example, if for your little application, you could have a user configurable part, and they would essentially store that in a JSON file locally using local storage. All those buzzwords we're starting to know, right? And that piece of JSON would just be how they configured that page. So the next time they come to it, the first thing that your page does is goes out and says, oh, is there a JSON file for the configuration for this user? Okay, yes, there is. So I'm going to read all those attributes from that file, and I'm going to change the screen and the rendering of the web page so that it matches what they want. Any questions? I guess not. Very good.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, I will post this stuff up on the shared folder. Those two little HTML files with the examples and this PowerPoint.
Okay.
Thank you.
Actually, I do have a question, Dan. So you said to implement DOM, you usually use JavaScript. Is that right?
Yeah, not to implement it, but to manipulate whatever it is. People usually use JavaScript. You can use whatever language that you want, whatever supported language, but by and large, if you look at a lot of people's code, it's mostly JavaScript that's used to do that.
Okay, so just like really basically, so what is DOM again?
It's a fancy way of saying what is the back end of a web page. So, for example, if you pull up Firefox and you go to a web page, the first thing that the browser does is look at that page and says, oh, okay, I need to build from the code of that page, from the HTML and other things, I need to build this object. And the object is just a representation of what the web page looks like, right? So if there are various tags on the HTML, there's various text attributes and divs and all that stuff go into making this DOM tree, and that's what the browser uses to produce the rendering on the user's computer. So it's a back-end representation of what's displayed on the screen. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay. So I'm the last presenter, so I can present. Thank you, Dan. That was really in depth. Okay. Okay, so my presentation's on CSS3 transitions, and can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so CSS3 transitions are what allow you to transition from one property value to another and to do it smoothly over, however much time you specify. So so basically, like if you hover over a button and the button enlarges, that's kind of like that can be a transition where they've specified we want to change the width and the height to this amount, to X amount, and we want it to make a smooth transition. So you use it by using the property transition in your CSS code, and you will have a transition and then this colon, and then you'll have the transition property and then the duration. This actually has a comma between them, but you wouldn't have that comma. That's a mistake. So I'll just change that right now. And then you would use whatever class you're in, and then hover. So you usually trigger a transition. From what I understand, you trigger a transition from the hover aspect to CSS, and then you'll put the property, whatever property. So if you're talking about width, you'll put width colon and then the value. So if the new value is 100 pixels, you'll put that. Okay, so You can also use this to transition multiple properties, not just one. So not if you want to transition both the height and the width at the same time, you can do that. All you have to do is put a comma between the two different properties. So I'd put I'd put transition colon the width, and then I want to do it over 1 second, comma, and then transition property height, same 1 second, and then semicolon. And then besides just the property you're changing and then the duration, the amount of time, you can also specify a timing function and a delay. So a delay would be if you want them, if you're hovering over something but you don't want the transition to start until like a second later for whatever reason. And then a timing function is kind of like specifies the speed at which the transition will happen. So these are the different types of transition timing functions. You can have an ease, a linear ease in, ease in, out, and then you can specify your own with a cubic Bezier function where you put, I think you would insert seconds for n. And I'll just show you. On W3 what they had, because all my information is taken from W3 schools. So oh, sorry, it's not pulled up. Okay, so this would be an example of a transition. Okay, sorry. So I'm hovering over it, and then it's the property here is the width changing, and it's changing smoothly over time. And here they've specified 2 seconds. And then if you want to see a timing function, here are the different timing functions. So this is an ease, and an ease is what's the default if you do not specify. So it's at first it goes, I think slow, fast, slow, and then a linear is just the same speed over time. Ease in is it goes slow at the beginning. Ease out is it goes slow at the end, and then ease in out is slow, fast. I think slow, fast, slow. Here we'll go back to my. I thought we were going to go back to my presentation. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm a little all over the place because I was using a different computer, but then my son pulled out the cord, and so that computer turned off. So now I'm on my laptop. Okay. Okay, so anyways, and this code right here is just the code that's taken from W3 again, W3 schools, and you can add this to your portfolios, and obviously you want to change them to have like your own examples, but you would just put the class and then the transition timing function, and then you would specify which one you want, if it's ease, linear, ease in, ease out, whatever. Okay, so this is a sandbox code, and this is just like the really basic. It just specifies the property and then the time, the seconds it would take. And then these are some suggested practice ideas to do. So use this sandbox code and then add a delay, add a timing function. Try to use transitions using the shorthand method. So here, this first example under besides just the property and duration,
That's the shorthand example. No commas. You only use commas in between different properties that you want to change simultaneously. So just, if you're using the shorthand method, you don't put commas between the different effects you want on the transition. And then a longhand method is that you specify transition dash property and then whatever property, like height, width, whatever, color. You can even do color, I think. Transition duration, the time. Transition timing effect is the speed again, and then transition delay is how long you want before the transition effect actually occurs. So, and then everything is from W3 Schools. I wanted to include things from other areas too, but it just didn't seem to come together in time. So, anyways, are there any questions on my presentation?
On the transition shorthand properties, do they have to go in that specific order, like with padding, where it's top left or top right, bottom left? Is it that kind of thing, or can it?
Yes. Yes. So if you're using shorthand, they need to be in that specific order. One thing I didn't mention is depending on different browser capabilities, you can't always just say transition. So like you have to use Moz and WebKit with certain older browsers. But almost all browsers nowadays and like several older versions of browsers support transitions. Okay, looks like Brother James says the CRAP app meets the criteria for the class, in case you didn't catch that.
Wait, what did he say?
Brother James said that the CRAP app fits the criteria. Yeah, he just put it in a little comment. He says he hasn't seen the proposal yet. Anyway, are there any other questions?
So, like, if you're in Hangouts and the little menu to the left pops up, is that an example of a CSS transition? Is that where that kind of ease-in thing would be applied?
I think maybe. It might be more of an animation. I don't know a lot about animations yet.
Right.
But it does seem like that. Yeah, sorry, I don't know more about that.
Thanks, Whitney.
Yeah, no problem. So I will also add this code to the GitHub and then also post my presentation to the class folder. Yeah. And then for next week, it looks like our I can't find it here.
I have them. Are you talking about for next week's assignments on who's teaching?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see that I'm down for CSS3 transitions, Sierra for CSS3 animations, and Allie for using local data storage.
I was curious. It was Brother James kind of mentioned in his email about. Sorry, Mike. You hear that piano in the background. How maybe going over everybody's like strengths for the different topics in the class. I'm just curious. At least I'm curious what everyone feels like their strength is, whether it's a specific language, programming language, or whatever it is that you feel like you kind of know better than something else. I don't know if we want to go through those or not. I just curious.
You know, it's been a while since I've done JavaScript, but like out of all these topics, I think probably JavaScript and something in CSS might be, but I wouldn't call them strengths, it's just that I'm more familiar with those than the other things listed.
Sorry, what did you say? You said JavaScript and CSS?
Yeah, but I wouldn't call those strengths. I was just saying that those are the topics that I'm more familiar with than anything else.
Okay.
Yeah, and I understand a little bit of objects, just only because I took 260 last semester, but that's something that I just consider myself learning.
Maxine, what is your major?
CIT.
CIT?
Yeah.
Cool. I feel like my strength is in programming logic. I've used like several different languages, so sometimes I get confused between languages, but like I've done a decent amount of programming, I think. Not that I'm not like an amazing programmer.
Hi, baby. That's a cute baby.
Yeah, see, when it comes to the programming stuff, I'm very basic knowledge just of HTML and CSS and the JavaScript that I learned in 160. But so the programming side's harder for me. So if we need anything using like Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, I can do some more of the design aspects. I like that stuff more.
So
I'm a web design major. This class isn't. I was gonna do because design is actually my emphasis. Web design development, design is my emphasis. This class isn't actually required, but I wanted to take more of the development classes just so I could learn more because I think it's beneficial.
So are you really comfortable with CSS then?
Who, me?
Was that Allie or was that Sierra who spoke last?
I have a basic knowledge. I mean, I took 230 and I've done a little bit, but I'm definitely not proficient. I can figure it out. With Google for some things, but Allie also said that she's more comfortable with CSS, but
okay. That's good to know.
I'm kind of okay with all of it.
I guess I'm a software engineer major between CIT and computer science, so more procedural programming like C++, but I've taken the requirements for this class in JavaScript and whatnot, and CIT 230, so I have a little bit of HTML, CSS background, but just the basics.
So Garrett, have you taken CS 165 then, the object-oriented programming class?
I'm in that class right now.
Oh, okay. So does the topic that you did, with JavaScript, does that make sense then with the class that you're currently taking? Or is it making sense?
For
DOM? For the document object model? Just objects in general?
with CIT 165
Yeah,
or CS 165.
Or are you able to see how that relates to this class right now, with how we're going to end up using objects?
I guess the objects are just a way to control your data in an easier way. Just a way of viewing your programming, I guess I could say.
Almost everything in JavaScript is an object, right?
So like there's the base things like all the math objects like math.random or to change this text to all uppercase or things like those that are built in. Those are objects that are built into the JavaScript library. But then you can create your own, which a lot of people say you do that much, but we'll be doing in this class.
A lot of people say you don't need to do that, is what you said?
Just in a lot of base applications, as long as it's very simple, you don't necessarily need to because you could store those in variables instead. but to understand objects, we'll be storing all that inside of objects, so then we can use JSON and AJAX correctly.
Maxine, did you see that thing from Brother James? He just commented, "Do you mind sending the Scripture Tracker app to him just because he's already looking for your email?" Thanks.
Yeah, I'll send it again. I actually sent it to both the BYU email address and the other. You know what I did? I sent it as a link. But I'll definitely resend.
Yeah, maybe just then we can tell him that.
I put a link in the chat that's pretty handy when you are trying to decide if you're going to use a particular feature, whether a browser can use it. It's a real handy little site that's got everything broken down by these attributes and so forth, and it lists, which browsers can use them and which can't, and if you can't, is there a workaround? Just kind of handy information.
And you said you're going to post that?
Yeah, it's in there now.
Awesome.
It's in the chat, yeah. Okay, well, cool. Thank you, Dan, for that. I think that's everything for this week. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to go over?
So is this the only meeting that we're doing this week? Last week we did two as an intro and then us going over our topics.
Yeah, just one meeting this week.
Okay.
Unless later in the week we think we need to discuss something else when we have some feedback about which app. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's mostly just working on our portfolios this week. And, yeah. Okay, very cool. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for everyone, to you, Dan and Garrett, for your presentations. They were really helpful.
See you guys later.
All right, have a great week.
Bye, guys.
See ya. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mom?